Stuff I Used to Do When I Used to Do Stuff show proudly presents the first time we clobbered the Ruskies with rock and roll. To celebrate our American Independence Day on the 4th of July in 1987, Bill Graham produced the first rock festival ever in the Soviet Union at Izmailova Stadium in Moscow, which he organized with Soviet authorities in less than 6 weeks during the waning years of Glasnost. The concert was scheduled to be the climax of a 2-week Soviet-American peace walk, where 230 Americans and 200 Russians walked together over 450 miles from Leningrad to Moscow. Most of the last-minute production money came from Steve Wozniak, himself a part-time participant in the peace walk. Santana, Doobie Brothers, Bonnie Raitt, James Taylor all played along with the Russian band Autograph and 3 other state-approved Russian bands who performed more or less in between the American band sets. Santana headlined the show, and I was Santana's lighting designer. This quickly thrown together historical show was announced to the world on June 26, when we happened to be playing a concert at Pine Knob, north of Detroit, which is almost a hometown gig for me. Santana received what seemed like a 10 minutes of non-stop applause when their manager, Ray Etzler, stepped up to the microphone downstage and announcing a band from the Americas, Santana. The pride flowing through my veins at this hometown gig was an incredible rush, as the audience would not stop applauding before the band even played a single note. We already had shows booked in America after Pine Knob through July 4th that we had to reschedule at the last minute in order to arrive in Moscow by July 1st. Russia supplied a plane to take all of us, band, crews, and management, all the way to Moscow. Our large group gathered for a picture that was taken of all of us during the fuel stop in Ireland, where I also refueled with a fresh Guinness at the airport. Besides being the first rock concert stadium show in a weird-ass country, it was being filmed by Showtime. Now, I agreed to light all the bands for the concert to make them all look great for the Showtime cameras. But back then it was a challenge. Concert lighting just didn't look good for the video cameras, for the cameras we had at the time, and I liked the challenge. And Showtime didn't bring a director of photography to guide me along. I was on my own, without even a monitor to see what it looked like. The closest place to get concert lighting equipment, a PA system, and the rest of our staging production requirements was 800 miles away in Budapest, Hungary, from our old friend Laszlo Hargagras. But with everything going so fast in pre-production, I had zero advance information regarding what the lighting package was going to be like. My orders were to just make whatever showed up work when I showed up. So we arrived on site July 1st. First thing Bill Graham, Killer Khan, Peter Barsotti, and I, and some others did was to check out the stage. The scaffolding around it was covered with heavy canvas. It had beautiful artwork all over it. And I suppose it was a homage designed to appear like the stadium stages Bill Graham Presents put up for the Day on the Green concerts back home in the Bay Area. Bill was impressed that they went through all that effort to honor his passion to decorate big stages like he did back home. But back home, we had people that knew aerodynamics, and the material they hung over stages would breathe enough to allow air to pass through. This canvas that they used in Moscow was thick and solid. I warned Bill that if a big wind showed up, the canvas would act as a sail and would blow the entire stage down. To top it off, they outlined the canvas with stupid-looking multicolored light bulbs like you might see at a used car lot. I pointed out that the stage was unsafe until we take down the artwork, and that the colored light bulbs looked like crap. Bill pleaded that we could closely monitor the weather, and if any indication of a heavy wind showed up, then we'd tear it down. He wanted to leave it up, if at all possible, and I wasn't comfortable with that plan, but it was Bill's call. But whose call will it be to take it down if dangerous weather approaches? I insisted we needed a tight backup plan over what to do, because if we end up having to tear it down, we're going to have to do it fast. And whose call will that be? Bill answered, it would be Steve Killer Khan's call, our production manager. Okay, fine. Well, who will be responsible to make and carry out the plan to quickly dismantle all that canvas, to tie it into safe bundles attached to the scaffolding when the time came? We didn't bring a rigger with us. And as great as Laszlo's crew was, they didn't have the experience where we could just blindly trust them to pull off such a dangerous feat safely and in a timely manner. In fact, other than Laszlo, the rest of his crew only spoke Hungarian. Having to communicate in three languages was one of the other interesting features of the setup for this concert. On stage, we had interpreters for Hungarian, for we needed to manage Laszlo's able crew, and we had Russian interpreters to assist us managing the Russian stagehands, who had never even seen a rock concert before, much less worked one. In fact, most of them had not experienced a long day of hard physical labor doing anything. Two of the Russian stagehands actually collapsed from convulsions trying to keep up with the hustling Hungarians and us ugly Americans. Luckily, Jeff Baxter, guitarist from the Doobies, knew CPR and brought them back to life and back to work. The hotel where us Americans stayed was an hour drive from the stadium, and the transportation that Russia supplies was a couple hours late for lobby call the next morning. When I finally showed up at the stadium, Laszlo and his Hungarian crew had already hung the lighting truss, which was still floating at waist height. I finally get to see what I had to work with. The trusses contained about 250,000 watt medium power lamps, which were all gelled red, blue, and amber, spread out evenly across the system. Our show would start at 4 p.m., would only go until the evening, and we had cameras for showtime, but no front spotlights or even a director of photography. Other than getting my approval for the gel selection, the trusses were ready to be taken up to trim height, and by now we're blocking the stage from allowing the sound and band gear to finish setting up. The quote-unquote lighting design was boring and useless for cameras, or to express any theatrical musical emotions. So we took the gels out and went all white. Bill is the only concert promoter I know in the world to personally work with the crew setting things up. That hands-on approach is just one of the many reasons he gets to be a legend, which he loved being. That and the sloppy way he dressed. The day before the show, during our 11th hour squeeze, Bill was on stage working with his ratty sweatshirt and his sleeves cut off at his shoulders and an old pair of tattered shorts. The immaculately dressed, smug-looking pretty boy with perfect hair approached the stage, demanding to see Mr. Bill Graham. You should have seen the look of disbelief in his eyes when I pointed out that the tattered-looking laborer that was Bill Graham. He aggressively and importantly interrupted Bill to inform him that Bill had made a very grave mistake. And don't worry, there was still time to rectify this grave error. Bill just stood there saying nothing as the shiny pillar of self-importance's lecture went on. I walked around muttering countdown to my fellow crew members, knowing Bill was about to blow. This self-proclaimed very important person lectured Bill that this person was one of the most important journalists in the USSR. That he always got the best press seat at all events. But the grave mistake Bill must have unwittingly made was that this prima donna journalist was sitting with the second-rate press in the cheap seat section. After the commie scribe made himself more than clear, Bill clears his throat and says, "Are you done?" Oh boy, it's going to be fun, I thought. Then Bill blew. He screamed, and I paraphrase, "I know exactly who you are, and that's why you got such a bad seat." Bill poked the guy close to the chest and off the stage as the journalist walked backwards in shock and awe. I think he also shrunk a few inches as he backstepped. Bill went on about how, even though he didn't know the Russian language, he had someone read him those articles that the journalist had written about how the concert would never happen, how it was a big American pipe dream by some wild-eyed, crazy cowboy capitalist pig who would never pull it off. Bill even quoted some of what the guy wrote back at him as he poked him off the stage. Bill gave that commie columnist a democratic dose of fearlessly frank freedom like I'm certain he had never experienced. Bill had a way with people. The next day, at 3 o'clock, 1 hour before the doors were supposed to open, we were wrapping up last-minute details for a huge crowd who were anxiously waiting outside the gates to get into this big freaking historical event. Bill was up on the stage working with the rest of us in the same ratty cut-off wardrobe he had from the day before, and that's when an army of Hundreds of uniformed soldiers marched into the field, full battle gear, helmets and guns, and they took their places. 2 guys thick outlining the sides and the rear of the stadium, and 5 guys thick lined up across the front of the stage. After their drill was completed, they all filed back out of the stadium to be on standby to shoot someone later if needed. At 3:15, just before the crowd came in, hundreds of young men in blue jumpsuits and goofy helmets marched in to form a line 90 feet wide in front of the stage, creating a human moat between the stage and the audience. Well, Bill walked down stage center and screamed, "Who's in charge here?" When the soldier in charge showed up, Bill screamed at him that this was unacceptable. The Russians had made an agreement with Bill that there would be no guns used for crowd control. Bill and this Russian soldier, who was a member of the Supreme Soviet, went back and forth yelling at each other for a few minutes. Bill screaming at this Russian soldier guy, and the Russian soldier guy getting impatient, trying to explain to Bill that this was Russia. This is how they do it. Bill would have nothing to do with how they do it. The funniest thing I remember Bill yelling at him was, "The vibrations from my bands will never get through 5 guys thick to reach your people." Like the Russian soldier had any idea what Bill was talking about. At some point, the Russian soldier guy told Bill that this is Russia, get it? You have no say in the matter, or something like that. To which Bill responded, "I have nothing to say about it. I'll show you what I don't have to say about it." After which he turned around to Peter Barsotti, his stage manager and personal assistants forever, and yelled, "Take it all down, boys. We're going home." It's going to be some loadout, I thought to myself, as Bill turned back to the Russian military dude and announced, "There, now you and your boys will have plenty to do with your stupid guns." Of course, the Russians backed down, and Bill got his way as usual. The Russian security force cleared out from blocking our groovy vibes from the stage as the audience filed in to receive them. That's when the wind picked up. As Peter Barsotti explains in the BGP book, Bill was arguing with this guy. Everything was falling apart. They moved the audience up. All the roses there, but they had thorns in them. The artists were there. We had built this proscenium piece. It was 2 hands joining, and the hands were doves. There was a Soviet arm and an American arm shaking hands. It started ripping down because they didn't put grommets in it, and it was falling. I had 8 guys trying to tie it back. Well, that's Peter's version. The wind did indeed start to blow the canvas from the scaffolding without the grommets. I guess it wasn't secure enough to be a sail after all. So I rounded up a crew of all of Hungarian stagehands to quickly follow me up the chain ladders with knives in our teeth and determination in our blood. The thing was, I was managing the expedition, but no one on my crew could speak English. So there was a lot of hand gestures, but we all knew what we had to do. We cut off the canvas, and as fast and furious as we could, we crammed it into the lighting trusses, where we secured it by tying it to anything that could hold it down, but away from the hot lamps. We were in a hurry, so we tied a lot of tight knots, nothing fancy that you could break away fast later. We wadded up and crammed that big picture of those hands reaching for each other to our front lighting truss, which was about 40 foot long. There were still many feet of canvas hanging off both sides of that lighting truss, which we pulled up and crammed into the truss and tied while those stupid multicolored light bulbs were breaking all over the place. Bill Killer and Peter helped their crew down on the stage to sweep up all the glass shards as fast as they could, as the audience waited for the first rock festival ever in the Soviet Union to finally begin. The whole crowd was watching and waiting on us to finish before Bill could start the show. You could see us up there in the Showtime special, cutting the last of the canvas artwork down over the chain motor hanging stage center. That's when I signaled to Bill, Killer, and Peter that all was secure. It's now showtime. I figured that was enough of that. Now, can I get back to the job I was actually hired to do, like direct the lighting that I designed for the whole show, which was nothing fancy, but should get us through the evening. Sure, I worked the white light to accent the music when appropriate to add some spice to the show, but I kept it simple and solid overall. No monitor view, no DP to sort me out. We were flying by the seats of our pants. The power was so tight that a generator guy from England kept me informed how hot each leg of electricity was reading throughout the show. I knew which lights were on which legs of power lines, so I could pull back on certain washes if that leg got too hot. I would juggle which lights to use together and when, so I wouldn't blow the breakers, which we came close to doing many times. We were walking a thin line, but we never went over it. I don't remember which set change killer approached me with Bill's next request, but I know my answer was no. Bill loved that painting of those hands reaching for each other that were now tightly knotted and crammed and wadded up throughout the front lighting truss. He now wanted me to take my Hungarian crew back up there to retrieve it. Next thing I know, Bill Killer and I were having one of those huddles Bill and Killer like to have when they're trying to sway you to do some crazy shit. He asked if my crew and I would climb back up and cut that picture out of that canvas and then bring it down so he could have children carried across the front of the stage at the grand finale when all the Russian and American bands would have a sing-along together to John Lennon's Give Peace a Chance. I told Bill we could never cut it up there. That's impossible. It's way too big. That should have been that. But this was Bill, so it wasn't. He didn't want to waste time talking about what was impossible, only what might be almost possible. So I told him we might be able to cut the ties, pull it out, roll it all the way across that lighting truss into a big snowball, and then drop it off one side of the stage where Bill and Peter could have the ground crew drag it behind the stage where they could then safely cut out Bill's pretty picture. So I told Bill that once I start doing this, I can't stop no matter what. The canvas will snowball into who knows how big of a heavy solid ball. It would be too dangerous, and there would be no way to tie down and secure something that big and heavy over the bands and audience, which the front truss is cantilevered partially overhead of. Okay then, how long will it take? I work with Bill at Live Aid and other festivals, and I know how serious he is about keeping performances on time at big multi-band shows. So I knew I had him at my next statement, which was, I have no idea. I reminded him that once I started that I could not stop until it was done. This venture would hold up the entire show for as long as it needed to once we began. He thought about it for about half a second and then said, good, then do it. I told Bill that if he was serious, then I would have to be in charge the entire time we were up there, and that he was not allowed to yell at me if he thought we were taking too long. So he agreed. Crap. Up we went, again, knives in mouth, etc. We started to cut the ties to unravel and pull the canvas out from the truss on stage right. More glass from those stupid light bulbs was falling everywhere as we rolled the canvas across the top of the lighting truss, about 20 feet in the air, slightly over the audience. One thing I didn't think about was that those span sets were wrapped around the truss, connecting it to the stage center motor in a manner that wouldn't allow us to push our big ball of canvas by it, causing a roadblock. The canvas had snowballed into quite a heavy solid ball when we got to that stage center motor. When I figured this out, I froze, like for a second. I couldn't just leave it, but I couldn't just leave it there and climb down apologizing. So as everybody waited and watched, I wrapped my legs tightly around that truss and signaled for the Hungarian on the other side of the ball of canvas to do the same. There wasn't room for the others to help us outside of sitting behind us, holding us steady as we leaned out over the audience. Then, holding onto the truss with all the strength my legs could muster, I leaned as far over to the side and again over the audience as I could as I reached around the span sets on the downstage side of the truss to catch the solid canvas ball that the Hungarian stagehand painfully struggled to hand me. That's when I realized just how heavy that ball was. When I also wondered, what the hell was I doing up there? I'm an artist, a freaking lighting designer. I don't need this shit. What an almost unbearable strain. Damn, that hurt. But we got it around the motor and over the audience as we proceeded to roll it all the way stage left. When we arrived at the stage left end of the truss, it probably appeared to Bill that we should be able to toss this now hugely amassed ball of heavy canvas down. That's when Bill blew it by breaking our bargain to bark at me. Not a full throttle yell like he was known for, just a little bark. But I guess I could still claim that Bill Graham never yelled at me. But he did bark a bit, but not for long. I was a bit too busy to think, so I yelled aloud, "Fuck you," right back at him in front of the whole production crew and about 40,000 people in the audience. "Fuck you, we made a deal." I think he was about to reply when I added, "And the longer I have to explain, the longer it'll take." Even though the big ball of canvas sitting on top of the truss appeared ready to throw down, lots of the canvas from it was still clumped up and crammed inside of and tied to the truss. Throwing that much weight overboard while it's still attached and tied to the truss could have been devastating and deadly. Well, we finally freed the rest of it and dropped it when we were ready, and not a second sooner. Bill was a man of his word, and a spoken agreement meant everything to him. So he accepted my rude reaction and just kept doing the next thing that had to be done, as usual. Peter Barsotti, who had worked with Bill for years stage managing and designing countless events, he was a top dog at BGP. But in all his years working with Bill, he complained to me that he never got the chance to tell Bill to F off, even once. Every time I saw Peter after that, he'd interrupt my focus or whatever I was doing to remind me of that moment. Jealous dog. Well, the grand finale of our concert was a success, with all the bands from both countries singing "Give Peace a Chance" together, while children carried the picture of those hands reaching for each other across the front of the stage. Bill had personally helped to drag that big ball of canvas behind the stage after I finally tossed it for his crew to cut that positively beautiful image out. He knew how important the closing image was to any good story.